Gabby Petito, Part 16. What was Brian Laundrie? Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. When faced with the question, what was Brian Laundrie, I'm sure many of you have some choice responses, all of which would not be complimentary. Of course, there are some of you that might question the use of was, as has been seen in the comments to the triple set of videos that I released yesterday, asking and answering certain key questions concerning Brian Laundrie and the death of Gabby Petito. There are those of you that don't actually believe that he's dead, and that somehow an elaborate plot has been hatched and executed whereby somehow his dental records have been confirmed as matching the remains that have been located in the swamp in Florida, yet he is alive and well elsewhere. Perhaps he's working with Elvis in the local fish and chip shop. It remains to be seen. Maybe he's living at large, riding around on Shergar, doing a bit of gambling with Lord Lucan. Maybe he will reappear at some juncture. But on the evidence as presented, he's dead. And that leads us to the question, what was he? Not in terms of throwing ad hominem attacks against him, although you would believe that those are thoroughly deserved in terms of the odious scumbag that he was, but rather, what was he in terms of the narcissist that he was? What classification of school did he belong to? Keen students of my work know that I determine narcissists as having NPD, and I have a high evidential standard before determining that somebody is a narcissist. And when I deem that they're a narcissist, I do so after looking at a range of behaviours over a particularly sustained period of time. Not just one act, not just 2 or 3 acts, but a multiplicity of certain activities which connect with the various pillars of narcissism to get over a strict evidential threshold. And then they are determined as a narcissist. And quite simply, you can't be a lot of a narcissist or a little bit of a narcissist, you are just a narcissist. Note the distinction with narcissistic traits. Many of you listening to this, you will have, of course, narcissistic traits. Everybody does. Some of you will have very few and they're weak. Some of you will have quite strong ones, and a number of them. But you'll also have empathic traits alongside those, which will either be of a comparable level or stronger. And if you want to understand more about which narcissistic and empathic traits you have, and how strong they are, and the interrelation between the two, you can always undertake the trait detector. Details can be found in the menu bar, the detector section at narcsite.com. Similarly, if you have any suspicions about an individual that you want to confirm that they are a narcissist and you want to know why, and you want to know the school and cadre, and why, just use the narc detector, also found in the detector section in the menu bar at narcsite.com. I categorise narcissists by school and cadre. A simple definition is cadre's preferences, schools exhibit behaviour characteristics. Cadres are victim, somatic, cerebral and elite, which is an amalgam of both somatic and cerebral. If you want to understand more about those, just go to the Knowledge Vault, link in the video description, and obtain HG Malls, and the relevant one, victim, somatic, cerebral or elite. When it comes to the school, I categorise into lesser, mid-range and greater, and the ultra, which is me, and then lesser, mid-range and greater are subdivided. So there are 4 subcategories of lesser: lower lesser, middle lesser, upper lesser A, upper lesser B. Mid-range, 4 categories as well: lower mid-range, middle middle range A, middle middle range B, and upper mid-range. Greater, 3 subcategories: lower greater, middle greater, and upper greater. And you will find through my work, my articles at narcsite.com, the many hundreds of videos that you'll find here on my YouTube channel, and material in the Knowledge Vault, and also my books, which you can obtain on Amazon, and some of them also through the Knowledge Vault, you'll gain more material about the characteristics, behaviours and outlook of those various sub-schools to aid your understanding. But what about Brian Laundrie? Where does he fit in? Which sub-school and cadre does he belong to? Well, let's take his cadre to start with. As I explained, I categorise by virtue of victim, somatic, cerebral and elite. We can safely say that cerebral is not applicable. He's not somebody that was university educated. He doesn't appear to have a strong interest in art or film or literature. There's not a lot of evidence to demonstrate that he was some kind of political animal. He may have interest in music, but overall, he doesn't stand out as a cerebral individual, both in terms of his innate intelligence and the interests and behaviours that are associated with that. So we would exclude cerebral from the analysis. The extent of the cerebral traits are also so low, if at all, to exclude elite. This then leaves us with victim and somatic. Well, what about victim? Well, of course, all narcissists have a victim mentality, but that doesn't ascribe them the position of the victim cadre. He would have to demonstrate repeated ill health, or feigned ill health, feigned injury, or real injury, that he relied upon to ensure that Gabby Petito in effect mothered him. That he would perhaps regard himself as cursed. He would be a whiner, a serial complainant. That he would have issues with anxiety, perhaps. That he was incompetent sexually. Poor hygiene, for instance. I suspect that there may have been incidents of anxiety exhibited by him, but on the evidence as seen, I don't see strong victim traits, and therefore we would exclude it. This then leaves us with somatic. This is supported by the fact that he was relatively clean and well-groomed, that it was evident that he had a preoccupation with money, given the way that he freeloaded with certain aspects of his life. Social media was utilised. It was clear that there was a sexual relationship, that he liked to look his best and appear repeatedly in a lot of the video footage and pictures that appeared on there, and that he was an individual who would fit best with somatic. Not the strongest somatic narcissist in the world, not at all, but the category that he would be most appropriately fitting to would be somatic, and therefore his cadre is somatic. What then with regard to his school? As you know, I very much dislike categories such as covert narcissist, grandiose narcissist, vulnerable narcissist, because I regard them as far too wide. For instance, a covert narcissist could cover lower mid-range, middle mid-range A, middle mid-range B, upper mid-range, lower greater, middle greater, and upper greater. That's 7 different categories, and believe me, there are vast differences between those sub-schools. As I've explained in the video, The Covert Narcissist, you can certainly talk about covert behaviours, vulnerable behaviours, grandiose behaviours, absolutely. But to categorise as a covert narcissist is limiting and unhelpful. Indeed, only a day or so ago, I received a glowing email from one of my clients who explained that it wasn't until she came across my categorisation of the narcissist that she's married to as upper mid-range elite that all the light bulbs came on. Where people had said, oh, he's probably a covert narcissist, she listened to the material about the covert narcissist and it didn't resonate. Certain factors just didn't apply, many of them. And this is why my categorised system, comprehensive, detailed, and easy to understand, is far superior to that which anybody else uses. And I'm pleased, of course, to see that my categorisations are now being utilised more and more by individuals when it comes to trying to work out what type of narcissist they're dealing with. What of Laundrie then? Where would I place him in terms of his school? Well, before I do so, let's have a look at the poll that was placed on my site, on YouTube, when I posed the question of you, loyal viewers, as to what school of narcissist you believed him to be. I posed the question, Which subschool of narcissists do you think Brian Laundrie is? And I asked that question roughly 3 weeks ago. Now, I wasn't able to provide you with every single subschool categorization that I have devised because YouTube wouldn't let me have that number of options. And therefore, I chose a spread from the 5 that I was allowed. Lower lesser was voted for by 12%. Upper lesser type B, 18%. Lower mid-range, 43%. Middle mid-range type B, 18%. Lower greater, 8%. Did you vote? And if so, which category did you determine him to be of those offered? As you've just heard, the majority category, or the one that's been voted for the most compared to the others, is lower mid-range. Let's find out whether those that voted for lower mid-range were right, or did he fall within one of those other categories as advanced? Well, first of all, we consider, is he a greater narcissist? He's not self-aware. That was evident by his behaviours. It's also evident that there isn't repeated calculated behaviour. He's not Machiavellian. He doesn't exhibit very high charm. He doesn't exhibit a very high cognitive function. He's not a hugely successful individual. He doesn't have a huge fuel matrix. He is not ultra-polished. And there are many other factors appertaining to the greater that he does not hit. Indeed, he doesn't accord with any attributes that would ordinarily be assumed with the greater. And therefore, we exclude greater from this analysis. Therefore, if you voted lower greater, you're wrong. What then do we know about his behaviour? Well, we know that he engaged in physical violence. There were reports of him having slapped and struck and hit Gabby Petito. Physical violence is something, of course, that can be found amongst any subschool of narcissist. But he would engage in such behaviours where he was being witnessed, and the use of violence on what would appear to be a repeated basis and in a visual way is something that is ordinarily found with lesser narcissists. He also exhibited heated fury. That was shown in the incident at the restaurant. He explodes. Of course, there will be instances of silent fury as well, the cold fury, but we have heated fury, which is seen by a lesser. He had, of course, an individual whose cognitive function, from the way that he talked, the way that his responses, would be placed somewhere at low to moderate, and therefore that could find him either within the lesser or mid-range category. When it came to employment, there's not a lot of information to hand at the time, of course, because they'd elected to go on this van life. But again, his employment status of what he'd done in the past would place him most likely within lesser or mid-range. He does not appear to be an individual that was particularly well regarded by people who all thought Brian's a really great person, and therefore that would move him more towards lesser. With regard to his cognitive function, as mentioned, somewhere between low and moderate, therefore either lesser or mid-range. He's not an individual that exhibits massive amounts of charm. He was sociable and friendly enough with the police officers, for example, but one would see that probably he would operate with moderate charm, which would be mid-range. In terms of his fuel matrix, it would be on the small side, and that would place him within lesser. In terms of his financial circumstances, they weren't the best in the world, and although I don't have exact details, of course, he was moved to have taken Gabby Petito's debit or credit card and access her bank account. That exhibits criminal behaviour, which is more likely to be found amongst lesser, and financial issues, which again is lesser. He did, of course, utilise pity plays. We saw that in the body cam footage that I've analysed earlier, and that's a mid-range behaviour. He exhibited a low threshold on his ignited fury. It didn't take much to push him in terms of causing him to lose his temper, that fury to ignite. And that was exhibited again from the eyewitness account of him assaulting Gabby Petito in the street, and the later material that was provided about what happened at the restaurant. And of course, we also understand that he has throttled Gabby Petito. That exhibits again a low threshold on ignited fury, and throttling is something that would usually be found amongst a mid-range narcissist. Choking, throttling. One can imagine with Laundrie that he was the type of individual that could turn on the waterworks, and that is a mid-range behaviour. He also, of course, engaged in a lot of different manipulations, which we don't know the full total of them because we weren't there on a 24/7 basis with the relationship between him and Gabby Petito, but his manipulative palette, on balance, would accord more with that of a mid-ranger. At this juncture, we have a balance, really, of lesser behaviours and mid-range. One of the most important factors in determining his sub-school is the operation of his facade. A key moment, of course, was shown in the body cam footage, where he played this supposedly innocent, hard done to, I'm just a regular guy and she's a bit crazy, aren't women like that, guys? So he exhibited a degree of the ability to try and connect with the mindset of the police officers, which shows a degree of cognitive empathy. It also exhibits facade management. What he didn't do was stand there yelling and shouting, she's a crazy fucking bitch and she got everything that was coming to her. I should have knocked her clean out, and ranting and raving. That would be a behaviour that would be exhibited by lesser narcissists, operating with no facade, showing that heated fury in lots of different circumstances. Now, of course, his facade wasn't there all of the time. Witness again the fact that he was seen in the street assaulting Gabby Petito, and the behaviour at the restaurant. The facade of a narcissist points to either greater or mid-range. We've already excluded greater, and therefore the facade would have to be that with mid-range. And that facade is invariably one of, I'm a nice person, I'm a kind person, I do lots of things for other people, I'm a regular guy. With an upper mid-ranger, it's more of a facade of superiority, and he doesn't exhibit that. He doesn't come across as quietly confident in his own way, or even with a degree of bluster in terms of, I'm the best surgeon in this hospital, so do what I tell you, and people realise, well, he is the best hospital, so that arrogance, although it is arrogance, is founded upon something. He doesn't have that level of ability, and therefore upper mid-range would be excluded. His facade operates as we saw in the body cam footage, where he exhibits towards the police officers this appearance of, I don't really know what's happened there, and I'm just trying to get through life, and, I do love her, and, it's been a bit difficult, etc. The kind of almost lost and innocent individual. He plays up to being the victim. And therefore, he does exhibit a facade. And the fact that he does so means he can't be a lesser. Because what lesser narcissists do is they can keep the beast under lock and key for a period of time, but that's not a facade. That's just keeping the ignited fury quiet. A facade is projecting something to third parties, either being overly helpful towards other people, being a bustling member of the community, or this very capable, arrogant individual that triangulates people with that facade of superiority, or I'm just getting through life and I'm trying not to cause too many problems for me or anybody else. I'm just a regular kind of person. It's the projection of an image rather than keeping the beast quiet. And therefore, the projection of the image that we saw, particularly in some of the footage that was posted on the social media whilst both of them were alive, and particularly the body cam footage, supports the presentation of a facade. So that means he has to be mid-range. Where does he sit then within that mid-range category? Well, those of you, of course, that voted for lower lesser and upper lesser type B, both wrong. So, those of you that voted lower mid-range or middle range type B, you may well be correct. We're left with middle range A, middle range B, and lower mid-range. The facade for a mid-range narcissist does have cracks in it. Take, for example, Harry's wife. You might have seen the odd video that I've done about her, and of course I make reference to her use of the facade, but instances where it cracks. This is because where there is a conflict between the need to get control and the existence of the facade, ultimately the facade will slip, even if only for a moment, but it has to give way in order to gain control. Control is paramount. However, those intermittent, slight, almost microsecond slips of the facade are not something that we exhibited, or rather were seen with Brian Laundrie. What we saw with him from the material available is frequent lapses of it. Yes, he was able to maintain it in the body cam footage, but he didn't when he was witness having a full-blown row with Gabby Petito on the sidewalk, and also his behaviour at the restaurant. And this points to what is known as an intermittent facade. Namely, he is able to portray this regular guy, I'm okay and I'm a nice person, but he struggles to do it on a regular basis. Think of like a strip light flickering on and off, almost in a random fashion, and it doesn't take too much of a threat to control for his narcissism to struggle to maintain that facade. And therefore, that intermittent facade is not found with middle range A or B, because they are much better at maintaining their facade of being helpful to other people and kind, and indeed thinking that they're empathic. And therefore, if you voted middle range type B, close, but no cigar. Brian Laundrie is a lower mid-range narcissist because he exhibits an intermittent facade, and he is an amalgam of a range of lesser behaviours and mid-range. That is the outcome for him. If you voted for that, well done. Do you get a prize? You can pat yourself on the back. And also, of course, your prize is listening to this excellent breakdown to help you understand more about narcissism. If you want to learn more about the lower mid-range narcissist, look out for videos, search for that title, and of course, you can go to the Knowledge Vault and obtain H.G. Moore's The Lower Mid-Range Narcissist, and that will expand your knowledge there. Please do like this video and ensure that it's shared so that more people are educated about this series. It needs far greater prominence than that which is received already, and it's you that can help achieve that by sharing it as widely as you possibly can. You are an army of many. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.